So in one of my videos, someone actually commented asking me to do an in-depth video of how I was able to learn the Portuguese language, the process I used, and all that I did to become very fluent. So in this video, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the process I used and whatever I did to be able to learn Portuguese and become very fluent. So first of all, I'm from Ghana, and Ghana has, I think, around 80 or 90 languages for those of you who don't know. So we have from the Tree to the Ewe to the Fanti to the Ga. These are all indigenous languages that we have in my country. And so I am very used to languages. I am very used to different kinds of dialects. But let me tell you guys, Portuguese is actually one of the most difficult languages that I've ever encountered. And I've learned also French, which to me, French is also very difficult. But comparing Portuguese to all the languages that I speak, that is around, I understand and speak around 4 or 5 languages from my country. Portuguese is by far one of the most difficult languages that I've ever learned. When I got the opportunity to come to Brazil to learn, I actually started learning Portuguese way back in Ghana. I started learning some basic vocabulary words like hello, hi, that is oi, hola, but it actually wasn't enough for me to be able to move around within the first few days or few months when I got here. What happened was, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my process. When I left Ghana and got to Brazil, what I did, where I went, and how come I learned Portuguese this well. Yeah, so what happened was I got an opportunity to come to Brazil through the PEC-G program. I left Ghana in 2015 and I got here to Brazil. The first state that I was sent to was Pará, and the city was Belém. And what helped us was, we got here in a group with 3 Ghanaians. There were guys from Benin, there were guys from Congo, it was a mixture. So we're all in the same class and we started the learning process. They actually took us to the university there in Para. That is where we started in March 20, I think 2015. In March, we started the process of learning Portuguese, and it wasn't easy. For those guys who speak French, they have some words that are a little bit similar to Portuguese. So they were able to understand a lot of things. Whilst we, the guys who speak English, we had a lot of difficulties because English is totally different from Portuguese. There is nothing even similar in Portuguese to English. So in a class, they were always leading us. They were always leading us. And we're having classes from Monday to Friday. Sometimes it was in the morning, sometimes it was in the afternoon. In the beginning, we were very relaxed. It was our first days here, so we're just chilling, going around, and we weren't even practicing Portuguese because we met some Ghanaian guys here. We met guys from Congo, from Guinea-Bissau, all over the place. So we're just speaking the local languages from our countries with these guys and weren't even practicing the Portuguese. But then we're given 6 months. For those of you guys who don't know, when you come through the PEC-G program, you have a period of 6 months to learn the Portuguese. And then after that, you have the CELP Brais, which I'll be bringing another video about this. And then you take part in the CELP Brais. If you pass the exam, you continue here in Brazil. If you fail, you are expected to go back or to return to your country of origin. So, we started hustling to learn the language inside the classroom and outside the classroom. Inside the classroom was very essential, but to me, what really helped us, what made us learn and become very fluent in the Portuguese language, it was the streets, talking to the guys in the neighborhood. They will use some terms which are not used in the classroom. And for your day-to-day activities, you need what is used in the streets, not what is used in the classroom. So it wasn't easy. We started hustling, we started going around talking to people. After 3 months or 4 months, it was still very difficult, especially for myself. I had a lot of difficulties, but then I realized that if I didn't pass the exam, I would have to return to my country. So, I doubled up my studies, and God being so good, in 6 months' time, we had the selfie prize, and I was able to write, talk, and I passed. You know, I was in my class. I was one of the top three that passed the exam with like flying colors, and no one actually expected that from me because I was one of the weakest guys in the class when it came to Portuguese. And I think what made Portuguese difficult for someone like myself who speaks English is the fact that, there are a lot of rules in the Portuguese language. They have a lot of verbs, a lot of conjugations. To me, it's totally different from English. They have the masculine and the feminine, you know. For example, they have countries that they put an article in front of before they talk the country. Most of the things that they say here in Portuguese, they put an article in front, and then the words are either masculine or feminine. For example, a television, they call the television she. Okay, it's crazy, but yeah. For example, a chair, they call the chair she. A telephone, they call the telephone he. So it is quite different. Whilst in English, we only say it. Even if it's television, if it's a chair, it's an iPhone, a Samsung, a telephone in general, we say it. We don't say he or she. It's the same with animals. They call animals he or she. So this also made it very difficult, for me in particular to understand Portuguese. And up to today, I have a lot of difficulties when it comes to this masculine and feminine. I make a whole lot of confusion when I'm talking. But yeah, with the fluency, I'm very fluent. I teach people with Portuguese and English mixed together. When I'm teaching my dance classes, I use only Portuguese. So yeah, that is a little bit of the process in the beginning. And then fast forward, I came to another state to study, that is graphic design. And when you are done with the Portuguese language and you start your course, you realize that you don't speak Portuguese, because with your course you see a lot of technical words that you've never seen in your life you know so it was very crazy at the beginning. I was very confused. I nearly gave up several times when I started graphic design here in Brazil. But then I'm an African boy. I'm Ghanaian. I don't give up that easily. So I persisted, and I was able to go through with the course. One advice that I would give anyone who wants to come and learn in Brazil or even to live here, you know, start learning Portuguese in your country. It makes the process a whole lot easier. If you know something before you come here, it becomes very easy for you to move around and you don't even need to depend on anyone. But if you come here without knowing anything of Portuguese, it gets really hectic because you have to depend on people for everything. Some Brazilians speak English, but it's not all Brazilians. So there are places that you go, no one speaks English, and you have to use 100% Portuguese. And one other advice that I'll give you is don't focus on grammar. You know, I'm an English teacher and I know what I'm saying when I say this. Don't focus on grammar. Focus on conversational, Portuguese. Focus on the conversation. Talk to people. After that, you learn the grammar. In the beginning, you need to know how to communicate, how to talk to people. Grammar comes later, you know. So, is Portuguese difficult or easy? To me, it was difficult in the beginning, but now it's easy. to you it might be easy, you know, from the beginning throughout the process till the end. It depends on each one of us, you know. So I wouldn't generalize that it's hard or it's easy, because to me it wasn't easy at the beginning, but at the end I was able to come out with flying colors. I was one of the, you know, the top tier students in my class when it came to Portuguese. So yeah, it all depends on you, if you think, or if your process is easy, or if your process is difficult. So this is just a little bit about, you know, my process of learning Portuguese, what I think about it and all that. In my next video, you know, I'll be talking about the Braz exam, which a lot of people also commented on my videos asking me to make a video about. So yeah, if you're not subscribed, subscribe so that you don't miss it, and I'll see you in the next one.